Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos, Nigeria. Here's what's coming up on The World Today. 436 people said to have been killed by Israel in 24 hours in Gaza. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa warns the conflict between Israel and Hamas could spill over to countries in the region. Plus, New Delhi residents struggle to breathe owing to thick blankets of smog shrouding the Indian capital. Well, let's get started. Israel has confirmed it successfully thwarted 2 Hamas drones which were identified crossing from the Gaza Strip into the Israeli territory at Nir Oz and Ain Hebasor areas said to be near the border with Gaza. It did not clarify how the drones had been intercepted or whether they were shot down. They also confirmed that the air defense also intercepted a drone that had infiltrated from Lebanon into Israel again, with very little detail following that announcement. In the meantime, the health ministry in Gaza says Israeli airstrikes killed 436 people in Gaza over the last 24 hours. Israel has also launched limited ground raids into Gaza to find information about hostages being held. More than 1,400 Israelis were killed when Hamas attacked communities near Gaza, shooting civilians dead in their homes, in the streets and at a music festival. Gaza says 5,000 people have been killed since Israel began bombing the territory in response, flattening entire neighborhoods. And as of today, plumes of thick smoke we see filling the Gaza skyline as Israeli bombardment besieged the Palestinian enclave with more airstrikes. This video, which you'll see shortly, shot from the Rafah border, shows explosions, smoke billowing near the Rafah refugee camp. The UN says desperate civilians are running out of food, water and places to shelter from the unrelenting aerial pounding that has flattened swaths of Hamas-ruled Gaza. Well, speaking of aid groups, the Red Crescent has begun sorting through aid packages at a storage facility in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, after a third convoy of aid trucks entered through Rafah, crossing from Egypt, bound for the Gaza Strip. Humanitarian deliveries through Rafah began on Saturday after wrangling over procedures for inspecting the aid, and bombardment on the Gaza side of the border had left relief materials stranded in Egypt. Receiving mostly medical supplies, a member of the Qatari Red Crescent, Akram Nasser, said they will work with the Palestinian Red Crescent on delivering the aid instantly to those in need north of Gaza. Rafah is the main crossing in and out of Gaza that does not border Israel, since Israel has imposed a total siege of the enclave in retaliation for an attack by Hamas militants on October 7. Rafah has become the focus of efforts to deliver aid. The UN says about 100 trucks would be needed daily to meet essential needs in Gaza, home to 2.3 million people. Let's now dwell a bit more on the aid coming into Gaza. While the people are appreciative of the aid, many of them say they need the shelling to stop more than ever.
שבהם אנחנו מבינים שמתכנסים מחבלים, שמתארגנים מחבלים לקראת השלבים הבאים במלחמה, והתפקיד שלנו הוא לצמצם את האיומים האלה. ולכן כל זמן שניתן לנו אנחנו מנצלים אותו על מנת לשפר את המוכנות שלנו ואת היכולת שלנו לבצע את התמרון בצורה.
Residents of Khan Yunis woke up on Monday after what they say is the hardest night so far the area has witnessed.
We were told that Khan Yunis is considered to be a safe place, and everyone came here from the north or from Gaza City because it is considered safe. But unfortunately, last night was the hardest night so far we saw in Khan Yunis.
The previous day, hundreds of Gazans waited for hours in Khan Yunis to buy bread as aid slowly trickled in across the Rafah border on the Egyptian side. According to Egyptian security and humanitarian sources, a second convoy of around 19 aid trucks was allowed to enter. Gazan resident Shadi Al-Akkad called for a solution to the supplies crisis.
If this situation continues, the entire population won't find food or drink. We won't find bread or flour, anything at all. The situation is getting worse. We need to find a solution. It's not fair. Some people's conditions are so bad. Some people are displaced and they cannot eat or drink.
Today, Japanese aid packages arrived to a school sheltering displaced Gazans after a third convoy of aid trucks entered through Rafah crossing from Egypt bound for the besieged Gaza Strip. Humanitarian deliverers through Rafah began on Saturday after wrangling over procedures for inspecting the aid and bombardments on the Gaza side of the border had left relief materials stranded in Egypt. UN officials say at least 100 trucks a day will be required in Gaza to cover urgent needs. However, the displaced say what they need is not aid, but for the shelling to stop.
Well, earlier today, the Israeli military confirmed attacks in the last 24 hours that hit 320 targets in Gaza, including a tunnel housing Hamas fighters and dozens of command and lookout posts. Footage released by the IDF purportedly shows aerials of various targets hit in Gaza. According to Palestinian media, Israeli attacks concentrated on the Gaza Strip center and north. A strike on a house near the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza killed several Palestinians and wounded others. Once again, the UN is warning that civilians are running out of places to seek shelter. Well, we have more from the Israeli military as ground forces mount limited raids into the Gaza Strip. The military insists the airstrikes are focusing on sites where Palestinian militants were assembling to attack any wider Israeli invasion. Israel's chief military spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, says 222 people have now been confirmed as taken hostage during the October 7th cross-border onslaught by Hamas, stoking expectations of a full-scale ground offensive by Israeli forces massed around Gaza. He said the military's operational readiness was improving and being enhanced all the time. Well, let's now bring in VOA's Ricky Rosson, who is right now in transit in Israel. Ricky, thanks for joining us on the program. Let's talk about the full ground offensive Israel is preparing for. Will this affect the current aid deliveries coming in from Rafah, or will they probably begin when the aid trucks have returned to Egypt?
We're not sure about when the full ground offensive will take place. There's talk that the government is pushing for it to begin, the politicians are delaying. Also that the Americans want to delay to give for securing the release of the hostages. But in any event, the ground offensive will take place in the northern part of Gaza, while the aid trucks are coming in from Egypt on the southern Rafah crossing.
There have also been more Hamas attacks on Israel, and this is despite calls by international bodies like the UN for a ceasefire. While it is certain there is more suffering on the Gazan side, where the Hamas militants are said to be hiding, why isn't there more pressure from that end for the militants to stop attacking Israel?
I think no matter what are the internal divisions and opposition to Hamas among Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, it seems that in the midst of a war, Palestinians are just uniting to fight and survive. They have no power or will to challenge Hamas in the midst of war.
And Ricky, earlier today we learned the town of Dorot was being evacuated because of its proximity with Lebanon and the possibility of attacks from the Hezbollah. Is this the only Israeli town being evacuated, or do you think there will still be more?
Actually, Sderot is in the south, near the Gaza border, and it was already evacuated last week. I think you're probably referring to the town of Kiryat Shmona, which they started to evacuate yesterday. It's a northern border city. And that's in addition to 28 other communities that were evacuated last week because of Hezbollah is carrying out missile attacks on the north, and the Israeli army is striking them in return. And just today, the Israeli army called for the evacuation of 14 more towns in the north.
All right, thanks for that clarification. And some U.S. officials think Iran supported the Hamas militants in their attacks against Israel. Has the Israeli government confirmed or denied this?
Well, just today, a senior Israeli military officer said that Israel has evidence of Iranian involvement in the Hamas attack, but cannot elaborate on whether this means equipment or training camps, both of which were highly sophisticated. Israeli President Herzog noted yesterday that they found on the bodies of some of the Hamas attackers instructions for making chemical weapons, but the army is still looking for evidence about whether Hamas has this capability or has gotten it from Iran.
And perhaps before we let you go, Ricky, I know we said you've been in transit to Israel. Wanted to get your thoughts, the feeling around you and your movement to the city, what you think is happening, what you're hearing, people are saying, and how they're reacting to the situation.
I live in Israel. I've lived in Israel for 35 years, but I was visiting the States when the war broke out. So then I was in transit back, but I've been here for a week, and the stories on all sides are heartbreaking. Where I live near Tel Aviv, we have air raid sirens all the time. So Hamas has not given up with trying to continue its attacks amidst the huge Israeli bombardment of Gaza, and it just seems like there's no end in sight.
We'll continue to watch the developments. Many thanks, VOA's Ricky Rossin, for us there. Thanks a lot. Well, EU foreign ministers are meeting in Luxembourg today to discuss the conflict between Israel and Palestinian militants Hamas, including a proposed humanitarian pause to help bring aid to Gaza. The bloc's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, joined UN calls for the pause as the UN humanitarian agency warned aid which crossed the border on Sunday was just a fraction of the amount needed. According to the humanitarian office, about 1.4 million of Gaza's 2.3 million population are now internally displaced, with many seeking refuge in overcrowded UN emergency shelters.
We are following with a great concern closing down of hospitals, no humanitarian access, lack of water, lack of food, and we are calling for urgent humanitarian ceasefire, for establishing humanitarian corridors, for humanitarian assistance to civilians. We have to act according to international law, according to humanitarian law, and do everything that the conflict doesn't split to the region.
It is very necessary that there will be humanitarian pauses, because it is absolutely necessary that there is more humanitarian aid and that people get help, get medicine, get food, get water.
As a person who would be against a ceasefire. Ceasefire means no one gets killed that day. But we have to think about what the goals are. And for Israel, and I think for the Western world, the goal would be to go after Hamas, the terrorist organization which has been terrorizing Israel for very many years. I think there is no black and white solution, and that's why when you ask the question, do I support an immediate this or that, I support talks, I support moving faster and putting on a fast track now the discussion for a two-state solution, because what we need is not peace for one afternoon, we need peace in the region.
Welcome back. The European Union Foreign Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, joined calls for a pause in the conflict between Israel and Palestinian militant Hamas to let more aid supplies into Gaza. Mr. Borrell said ministers would discuss the call from the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, for a pause to allow much more humanitarian aid for Palestinian civilians to enter Gaza.
And now the most important thing is to call for humanitarian support to go into Gaza. In Cairo, the Secretary General of the United Nations made a dramatic call in order to allow this humanitarian help to enter. On the first day, 20 trucks were allowed to come in. 20. Yesterday were about 20 more. But in normal time, without war, 100 trucks enter into Gaza every day. So it's clear that 20 is not enough. We will discuss also about the call for the United Nations about an humanitarian pause, which is also needed, even for giving back the hostages. The attacks of missiles, rockets from Hamas, from Gaza has to stop. The hostages, the people being kidnapped, has to be released, obviously. It is part of any step towards escalation. And we have to start thinking of how to revive the political process. But the priority at that moment is to make humanitarian support going into Gaza.
Well, back here in Africa, South Africa's opposition party, Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF, is calling on government to expel the Israeli ambassador to South Africa, Eli Belotsekovsky. The party picketed outside the Israeli embassy in Pretoria earlier today. Economic Freedom Fighters, the third largest political party in South Africa, the party says the demonstration is to highlight solidarity with the people of Palestine amid an ongoing conflict with Israel.
The reason why we are able to come and march here today and do it freely without soldiers carrying guns, without police carrying guns, without us being intimidated, is because the people of the world stood with us during difficult times. It was the people of Nigeria who took their money from their salaries and donated to liberation movement for us to get our freedom. It was the anti-apartheid movement in America, in UK, in many other parts of the world where the world stood in solidarity with us and said, we will not sit down and watch the Afrikaner apartheid regime killing our people in South Africa. That's why we have our freedom today. We are here to extend the same favor to the children of Palestine. The war in Palestine is not a holy war, it's an evil war.
Meanwhile, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says if the conflict between Hamas and Israel is not contained, it may spill over to other countries in the region. Mr. Ramaphosa spoke at a peace summit held in Egypt Saturday, where 12 world leaders gathered to discuss the conflict. The conflict between the two parties has been ongoing for 16 days after Hamas's surprise attack on Israel, leading to a full-blown war. Following negotiations, aid was allowed into the country on Saturday as Gaza residents have been stuck without food and water.
We call on all parties to exercise restraint and on all state actors to desist also from providing weapons to either of the two sides to this conflict. We are concerned that the response of the Israeli government to the attack on its citizens will further deepen a conflict that has engulfed the region for many decades and will make the attainment of a just and lasting peace even more difficult. We are also concerned that this conflict could start spiraling out of control and engulf a number of other states in the region. The only way to bring about peace is the fulfillment of the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people to human rights, to dignity, and to statehood.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Over in Israel, the University of Tel Aviv today hosted an exhibition paying tribute to the victims of October the 7th attacks by Hamas militants. Pictures of people who died, were abducted or are missing after the attacks fill the 1,300 seats of the main campus auditorium, a space normally used to host graduations and events. The initiative, launched on October 19th, was organised by the University Student Union, and it's part of a wider project called United Against Terrorism, which involves a number of other institutions across Europe and the US aimed at raising awareness about October the 7th attacks.
What you're seeing here is I would say, a really chilling installation that was put together by our student union. This is the main student organization here at Tel Aviv University. They decided to take the space of our main auditorium on campus, which usually serves us for graduations, orientations, and other events on campus, and to use the seats of this auditorium to place pictures of those who were murdered, abducted, or are missing from October 7th.
To other news now, the Kremlin says it has agreed with US President Joe Biden on the need to build a new world order, but that it disagreed that the United States was capable of building it. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the US was talking about an American-centric world order that would not exist in future. The exchange was emblematic of a contest playing out against the background of the Ukraine and Gaza wars, in which Russia is trying to persuade developing countries to join it in building a new world free of US hegemony. In a speech Friday, the US president had said that the order that had worked well for 50 years after World War II had sort of run out of steam and a new one was needed. He said Americans had an opportunity to do things if they're bold enough and have enough confidence in ourselves to unite the world in ways that it never has been, end of quote. Peskov said Moscow was in rare agreement with Biden about the need for a new order that, in his words, would be free from the concentration of all mechanisms of world governance in the hands of one state. Well, moving to the mainstream issues in the United States, hardline conservative Republican Jim Jordan's request to become Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives ended on Friday as his fellow Republicans revoked their support following a third failed vote on the House floor. Jordan told reporters that he had been honored to be a candidate, but that his caucus had informed him that he should drop out of the race. Republicans voted 112 to 86 to revoke Jordan's nomination in a closed-door meeting. The secret ballot vote means the chamber will be leaderless and unable to respond to President Joe Biden's request for aid to Ukraine and Israel until next week at the earliest.
Well, it was, I told the conference it was an honor to be there, speaker designee, but I felt it was important that we all know, get an answer to the question if they wanted me to continue in that role. And so we put the question to them. They made a different decision. I told the conference that I appreciated getting to work with everyone, talk with everyone. I got to know members in our conference that I didn't really know that well over the last 3 weeks, and that we need to come together and figure out who our speaker is going to be. I'm going to work as hard as I can to help that individual so that we can go help the American people. And I'm also going to go back to work. We got We got several depositions lined up next week in the Judiciary Committee, work that we need to do for the American people in our investigative work. So we'll go back to work there. But it's important we do unite. Let's figure out who that individual is, get behind him, and get to work for the American people.
Unfortunately, Jim is no longer going to be the nominee. We'll have to go back to the drawing board. What history will look at, the crazy eights led by Gates, the amount of damage they have done to this party and to this country is insurmountable. I've never seen this amount of damage done to just a few people for their own personalities, for their own fear of what's going through. And really, it's astonishing to me. And we are in a very bad position as a party, one that has won the majority, one that America has entrusted us with, that a simple 8 people have put us in this place.
So what's going to happen next? What kind of names do you expect to be on the candidate forum list?
I don't know. I mean, on a very serious note, this is talking about the person third in line to the presidency. And the furthest step anybody takes is from the front row to the podium. A lot of people here that might put their name in might not have the knowledge of what it takes in others. So I hope we had some other people up for the job. They both could have done the job. I'm concerned about where we go from.
House Republicans will return on Monday at 6:30 p.m. for a candidate forum, followed by an election process on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. The reason why I made that decision is we need space and time for candidates to talk to other members. It's fair to say that Leader Scalise wasn't given adequate time. He had 24 hours to campaign. I don't think that was right for him. Our nominee, Jordan, was given a little more time. Not right for him. The conference made a decision that we're going to move forward with a new speaker nominee today. But the space and time for a reset is, I think, an important thing for House Republicans.
Bitterly divided Republicans will face an uphill battle to unite around a candidate for Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives when they meet to nominate one today. Ellen Carmack, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, said on Sunday that the 9 candidates are evenly divided between centrist and the far-right nihilist branch of the party that essentially wants to shut down the government. Conservative Jim Jordan was the last lawmaker nominated for the job, but he was unable to get enough fellow Republicans to back him in a full House vote and is no longer a candidate. Jordan.
No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
And I think the way we should look at it is that they pushed the reset button last week. Okay, they're starting again. In other words, the logical successor to McCarthy, who was Steve Scalise, couldn't make it. The person who was most representative of the far right of the Republican caucus, he couldn't make it. It took him 3 ballots and he couldn't make it. So now they're back to square one. And I think on Monday night, it looks like we'll have 9 candidates making some appeal to the Republican conference. And the Republican Civil War goes on. And this is a party very much in the middle of a big and serious division.
Trust me, being Speaker is not an easy job, especially in this conference.
Biden can try to gaslight on the economy and inflation. He can try to tell the American people they are not struggling financially.
Let's now bring in our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, it's good to see you. Why are Republicans not throwing their weight behind Jim Jordan? He doesn't seem to be popular amongst his colleagues, so why was his name brought forward?
As we know, the Republican Party has been quite divided especially since the Trump era. And so what we know is that you have those who are very starch MAGA Republicans. You even have some Tea Party Republicans that still exist. And then you have those conservative Republicans that are in alignment with the traditions of the Republican Party. And we know that Jim Jordan does not necessarily meet what one would see as a traditional Republican. And he has not necessarily been one that has had a lot of experience in this area. And so I think that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at the fact that Republicans are extremely divided. They don't agree on many things at this time. And currently they are, one of the parties in the U.S. that is going through major turmoil and will be going through some sort of a changing of the guards very likely here in the next few years.
The Republicans have other candidates on standby. We're hearing 9, and this is following Jordan's poor performance. We hear today that they're also sitting to take a look at the new Speaker nominee.
Yes, so there are 9, which is unprecedented. That is a very large number of individuals. As you heard, typically there is a natural progression through those who have experience and have been a part of the Republican Party for some time, have been on various committees, and so they are ready for taking the job of speakership. You did also hear former Speaker McCarthy mention this is the 3rd person in line. God forbid something happened to the president or to the vice president. And so they would then be the one that would be the commander-in-chief of the country. And so when you think about the importance of this position, it really does require someone that has a deep knowledge of government, a deep knowledge of the country, and a true passion for the work that needs to be done. And so there's going to be 9 individuals that they will sit in here this evening, and hopefully they will be able to move forward with having a nominee.
Indeed, hopefully. But is there in any way a way the speakership could go to the Democrats?
The speakership would not be going to the Democrats. It would just be kind of an indefinite cycle, unfortunately, because the Democrats are not the majority. And according to the statutory regulations, it does require that the majority does have the speakership as ownership, just like Nancy Pelosi was a speaker when Democrats were the majority.
So you mentioned the Trump factor. Do you think that that's what's causing this delay? I mean, we heard from Elaine Carmack, a fellow at Brookings Institute, talk about how she feels, they essentially want a shutdown of the government.
Well, we could be saying that we are in election season. The presidential election season has started for sure, and we're beginning to see all types of tactics that are being put forth, especially when we're talking about 2 major world wars. We're talking about the U.S. being very present and visible in both. We're talking about a president now that has not a lot of support from the Republican Party, even though that was one of the things that I think many were hopeful that he would have come in the door because of his long-standing experience with foreign relations, especially with bringing parties together, both Democrat and Republicans. So the country is in a very divided position, and while the country's divided, so is the Republican Party divided. And so I think that we're in a position now where it's a bit tough to really be able to see that we're going to be able to move this thing forward. And as you said, is it the Trump factor? Potentially it's the Trump factor, but it's really about the division that obviously was brought further to light during the Trump administration.
And indeed, you have said President Joe Biden's request for aid to Ukraine and Israel still hanging there until there is a leader. What happens if the senators are unable to decide on a candidate? What's the statutory period of time for them to get this done?
Yeah, so we are looking at an indefinite period. This is typically, it happens after 1 or 2 votes. To see us going to a place of 9 potential candidates and having to hear that in a forum this evening, that is not something America has really seen before. But technically, it could go indefinitely. It could continue the cycle moving forward with what we've seen. There is no way in which we can definitely say that, no, we're no longer elections, we're going to appoint. But we do have, obviously, various statutory regulations that would state that the entire committee and the House could decide on doing something different if the elections were not showing to prove to be successful.
Many thanks, Maria Bird, there, our Washington, D.C. correspondent. Thanks for that update. Well, we continue this time in Argentina. The country voted in a general election on Sunday, with Peronist economy minister Sergio Massa posting a surprisingly strong first-place finish despite a major economic crisis ahead of the wild-haired pre-vote favorite, radical libertarian Javier Milei. Massa and Milei will go to runoff vote November 19 to take the presidency from mid-December, replacing outgoing centre-left Peronist President Alberto Fernandez. Massa ended the night with 36.7% of the vote versus Milei on around 30%. Conservative Patricia Burrich, popular with the establishment of business circles, ended with some 24%. Argentina's election race comes at a time of major uncertainty for the South American country, facing its worst economic crisis in 2 decades. Milei wants to dollarize the economy and cut the size of government. Massa would stick with the peso and try to bolster the labor market and growth. Any incoming government will have to resuscitate an economy facing triple-digit inflation, negative net foreign exchange reserves, a sliding currency. Meanwhile, a $44 billion loan program with the International Monetary Fund is creaking. Staying in the region, former lawmaker Maria Corina Machado is leading the vote count in the Venezuelan opposition's presidential primary by a huge margin and claimed victory at dawn today, with final results pending. Machado was tallying 93% of the votes, with just over 26% of ballot boxes counted. The primaries organizing commission said as the count, delayed by a server blockade, was expected to continue into Monday morning, it was unclear when the next results update would be given. Participation in the vote organized without state help was more than double what had been expected in some states. Venezuela has about 20 million eligible voters. The opposition held the contest to choose a unity candidate to face President Nicolas Maduro in his probable re-election bid next year, came amid pledges by the United States to roll back sanctions relief if the government fails to lift bans preventing some opposition figures from holding office. Now to Asia. South Korea, Japan and the US have conducted a joint aerial exercise near the Korean peninsula, marking the first such collaboration between the 3 countries. The drill aimed to expand the country's response capabilities against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. South Korea's Air Force said in a statement it involved a US B-52 strategic bomber as well as fighter jets of the 3 nations. At the Camp David summit in August, leaders of Japan, South Korea and the US agreed to carry out annual multi-domain trilateral exercises and set up a hotline for crisis communications. The US and South Korean military also said on Sunday that they completed a joint anti-submarine exercise, Silent Shark, which was held from October 6th to the 22nd near the US naval base in Guam and involved the Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine USS Topeka and Sung Woo Neil, the class diesel-electric submarine ROKS Jong-G. New Delhi residents were struggling to breathe today as a thick blanket of smog shrouded the Indian capital and its surrounding areas, according to the National Air Quality Index by the Central Population Board. The air quality was rated as very poor in the region. The index measures the concentration of tiny particles that can lodge deep in the lungs and cause serious ailments, known as fine particulate matter, PM2.5, from their diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less. Residents complained of itchy eyes, difficulty breathing amid thick clouds of smog. Delhi's Environment Minister Gopal Rai said the second phase of Graded Response Action Plan, GRAP, has been implemented to tackle the situation, which encourages commuters to use public transport, avoid private vehicles while directing the government to increase the availability of electric buses and metro trains. Dense smog usually forms over the Indian capital every winter as cold, heavy air traps construction dust, vehicle emissions and smoke from crop stubble burning in neighbouring states, causing a surge in respiratory illnesses among the city's more than 20 million people. Welcome back. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is scheduled to visit China at the invitation of Prime Minister Li Qiang and attend the 6th China International Import Expo. Albanese said on Sunday he will travel to China from November the 4th to the 7th to meet with President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang in a bid to stabilize relations with the country's biggest trading partner. The announcement of the trip to Beijing and Shanghai, the first by an Australian leader to China since 2016, came after a breakthrough on Saturday, October 21st, in resolving a dispute with China over its wine tariffs that have battered the industry. Well, China's Commerce Ministry said on Sunday the two sides had reached a consensus to settle the World Trade Organization wine dispute, as well as a dispute over Australian duties on Chinese window towers. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of African Affairs, Joy Basso, is challenging stakeholders in the tech ecosystem to explore the possibilities inherent within their control to proffer solutions to Nigeria's economic challenges. Ms. Basso, who met them in Lagos, says she is captivated by the level of energy and raw talent she has observed in her interactions.
It's a meeting with tech venture capitalists, startup founders and ecosystem supporters with the representatives of United States government, led by the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of African Affairs, Joy Basso. Ms. Basso is visiting Nigeria with the information that the United States does not have all the solutions for Nigeria, but following tested path to success could help.
Look for partnerships with American companies, whether that's directly in jobs, whether that's selling your product to them. And that, again, building on that incredible people-to-people US-Nigeria bond that is there. Yes, I want the government to be a great enabler of that. And you, as young Nigerians, nothing will stand in your way. And so form those connections, right? The last thing I'll say is that is what I found was the common thread as an investor to now being a diplomat is it's in these spaces, having these conversations. It's about solving problems together in partnership, and that is what comes from being an investor to also being a diplomat. And so do that directly with the products you sell, the goods you're producing, with your fellow entrepreneurs. Let's find ways to innovate, how we interact as well.
Some Nigerian tech individuals who have become success stories share some tips.
The first thing is, if you want to succeed, so if anybody is looking into going to fintech in Nigeria, understand the economics. Understand the economics very well, because if you don't understand it, you are not going to be successful. You probably just spend other people's money and park offshore, right? So the first thing is understand the economics. Right? I think the second thing is be humble to learn. If you're looking at going into fintech, you need a lot of connection with the banks. You need personal integrity. Years ago, we used to talk about Nigeria doesn't have credit rating system, but they do.
We are always keen on getting feedback from our customers, from our users. We are always very keen on getting feedback. Every quarter we do focus group discussions where we actually sit down with some previous users, to just interact with them and get their own insight as to what was your experience with our product, what changes would you like to see, and just really get their own sense around what we should be innovating in. Then next is, of course, always keep an eye out for your competitors, right? What are other people doing in this space? What are the stakeholders doing in this space? More recently now, there is the need to delve into AI.
Tips shared, it's time for those who have been equipped to confidently practice and watch the result. Ili John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
A city within the desert is springing up, but unlike other cities of the world, humans and animals will exist within a clean and beneficial environment. Well, that is what the Nome city offers. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, reports from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia.
It will be unlike anything the world has seen before. A linear global community hosting human, animal, and plant life with zero carbon emissions, all in the northwest of Saudi Arabia.
Here is the module of the line, and it goes through 3 ecological regions that I talked about before. Here's the first region, the coastal region next to the Red Sea. And here you're going to see where the phases are going to be done. You may ask, when will the line completely be finished? Has not been announced when it's completely finished, but what has been announced is we'll start phases.
Designed by 11 architects of global repute. NEOM has been established in 3 phases, including an underground marina, which will host the largest cruise ship in the world, the Wonder of the Seas.
Ships pass by and dock. They either dock here or they dock here.
A linear city with houses and amenities within 5 minutes of each other, and an ultra-modern train service that will ensure one is able to go from one length of the city to the other within 20 minutes.
In each neighborhood, you'll take a 5-minute walk to all your personal needs in your daily life, like school, work, a grocery store. Anything can be achieved in only 5 minutes of walking. Now, without cars, you may ask, how do people get from end to end in 170 kilometers in length? There will be a hyperspeed train called the Spine that takes you from end to end within only 20 minutes.
There is no word on when the city will be completed, but work is in progress to complete the first phase by 2030. When completed, it will host living quarters, schools, universities, businesses, culture, and everything humanly needed for communal living, while not leaving out the mountains and natural flora and fauna. There will even be artificial snow on the mountains just in time for Saudi Arabia to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games in Jeddah, a city within NEOM which should be ready by then. From Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, Amarachi Ubani for Channels Television News.
Wow. To other stories, Spain has seized gold artifacts valued at 60 million euros stolen from Ukraine after thieves were caught trying to sell them in Madrid. The police says the 11 pieces from the Scythian culture, which were exhibited in Kyiv Museum between 2009 and 2013, were smuggled out of Ukraine in 2016. 3 Spaniards, 2 Ukrainians, were arrested following an investigation that began when one of the pieces, a gold belt with ram heads, was sold in 2021 in Madrid. Police discovered the suspects had other pieces they were attempting to sell. The pieces had forged documents to make it look as if they belonged to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Ownership of the pieces was transferred to a Ukrainian Orthodox priest based in Madrid. And finally on the program, a northern French farmer surprised his partner by asking her hand in marriage by using his tractor to shape giant letters in a field which spell the age-old question, will you marry me? Farmer Julien Thelise had been preparing for the proposal for a year using a tractor and bush cutters. He wrote the 180-meter-long phrase in the 2-hectare field. Thelise popped the question October 16 by inviting his partner of 8 years, Elodie Bureau, to take a walk into the field of flowers. As they arrived, a man flew a drone to show Bureau the surprise on the remote control screen. And then Thelise got on one knee and asked the question. And thankfully, the bride appreciated the question, that she appreciated the creativity and said yes. Wouldn't you? That's our show this evening. Thanks for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.